My name is Nora Ellison. I am 34 years old, and 3 weeks ago, while I was sitting beside my daughter's hospital bed, counting the seconds between the beeps of a heart monitor, my parents moved my brother into my house and told him it was finally his. Not temporarily. Not as a favor. Not because there had been an emergency and he needed somewhere to sleep for one night. They moved him in like I had died and left the keys on the kitchen counter. His wife put their dishes in my cabinets. Their children opened the drawers in my daughter's room. My father helped carry their couch through my front door. And my mother, the same woman who had watched me work double shifts for years, stood in the hallway and told my brother, "Don't worry, Nora will understand. She always does." That was the mistake they had been making my whole life. They thought my silence meant permission. They thought because I had swallowed every insult, every comparison, every holiday where my brother was treated like a blessing, and I was treated like a backup plan, I would swallow this too. They had no idea that silence was not the same thing as surrender. I found out when I came home from the hospital with my daughter asleep in the backseat, her discharge papers folded in my purse, and her little stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. I pulled into my driveway and saw a black pickup parked crooked across the front walkway. There were cardboard boxes stacked on my porch, a plastic ride-on toy beside my flower pots, and a new wreath hanging on my door. A blue wreath. My door had never had a blue wreath. I sat in the car with my hands still on the steering wheel while my daughter mumbled in her sleep behind me. For a few seconds, I told myself there had to be an explanation that did not involve betrayal. Maybe my parents had come to clean. Maybe my brother had dropped something off. Maybe I was tired enough to misunderstand what my own eyes were seeing. Then the front door opened, and my sister-in-law stepped out wearing my gray cardigan. That was when something inside me went very still. Before I tell you what happened when the deed was finally read, tell me where you are watching from tonight, and if you have ever had someone mistake your patience for weakness. I want to know how many people understand what it feels like to stay quiet only because you are waiting for the truth to arrive. I grew up in a family where love always came with a ranking system. My older brother, Caleb, was the firstborn son, the miracle, the family name, the one my father introduced with a hand on his shoulder and pride in his voice. I was the daughter who learned to be useful. There is a difference. Caleb was praised for trying. I was corrected for succeeding too quietly. If he brought home a C in math, my mother said school was stressful for boys and he needed encouragement. If I brought home an A, my father asked why it was not an A+. If Caleb forgot a birthday, people laughed and said men were bad with dates. If I missed one phone call because I was working, my mother left a message saying she was disappointed in the woman I had become. By the time I was 10 years old, I understood that my brother's mistakes were personality traits and mine were character flaws. My grandmother was the only adult who ever said it out loud. Her name was Ruth, and she lived in a small yellow house at the end of Maple Ridge Road, the kind of house with uneven porch steps, lavender bushes under the windows, and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon even when nothing was baking. She was my father's mother, but she never let him confuse blood with ownership. When my mother called Caleb sensitive, Grandma Ruth called him spoiled. When my father said I was too independent, she said independence was what happened when children learned they could not rely on anyone else. She never shouted. She never fought in front of us. She just watched people very carefully, and later, when the room was quiet, she would tell me the truth in plain language. "Your family likes you best when you are carrying something for them," she said once, while teaching me how to fold pie crust around apple filling. "One day, Nora, you have to put it down." I did not know how to put it down. Not then. I spent years trying to earn a softer version of my parents. I worked part-time through college, sent money home when my father's hours got cut, babysat Caleb's first child for free because my mother said family helped family, and drove 2 hours every Sunday to sit at dinners where everyone asked Caleb about his plans and asked me whether I was still single. When I married a kind man named Aaron at 26, my parents behaved like they were attending a weather event. Present, but inconvenienced. Caleb forgot his dress shoes, and my father drove him to buy new ones 20 minutes before the ceremony. My mother missed the moment I put on my veil because she was calming Caleb's wife, who felt the bridesmaid dress was unflattering. Grandma Ruth was the one who stood in the doorway, looked at me like I mattered, and said, "There you are." Aaron noticed everything. He never said much in front of my family, but on the drive to our honeymoon cabin, He reached across the console, held my hand, and said, "You know you don't have to keep auditioning for people who already gave your role away." I laughed because I did not know how to cry without ruining the makeup still sitting on my face. Aaron was steady in a way I had never known before. He fixed loose cabinet hinges without announcing it. He made coffee before I asked. He remembered the names of my coworkers and the way I liked the windows cracked at night. When our daughter Lily was born, he held her like she was made of light. For 4 years, I had a family that felt safe. Then an icy January morning took him from us on a highway slick with freezing rain, and suddenly I was a widow at 31 with a 4-year-old daughter, a mortgage, and a grief so large it seemed to have its own weather. My parents came to the funeral and accepted sympathy like they were the injured party. Caleb stood near the coffee urn telling people Aaron had always been a quiet guy, as if quiet people were easier to summarize. Grandma Ruth came with a casserole, sat beside me after everyone else left, and did not try to decorate my pain with advice. She just held Lily while I folded Aaron's suit jacket and said, "You will not lose the roof over your child's head, not while I am breathing." At the time, I thought she meant emotional support. I did not know she had already started calling lawyers. Aaron had left some life insurance, but not enough to make life easy. I went back to work as a pediatric clinic coordinator, took extra weekend shifts, and turned our home into a careful machine of coupons, automatic payments, and lights turned off in empty rooms. My parents offered help twice loudly, in front of relatives, and both times the help came with conditions. My mother suggested Lily, and I move into her basement so Caleb could rent our house for a very fair family price. My father said a young widow should not be trying to manage property alone. Caleb said he and his wife had outgrown their apartment, and that it was selfish for me to keep a 3-bedroom house when I only had one child. I remember standing in my kitchen, listening to them discuss my life like I was not in the room, while Lily sat at the table coloring a picture of a purple moon. I said no. My mother blinked like I had spoken in another language. "No," she repeated. I said it again, quieter. "No, this is Lily's home." My father looked at me with that tired, disappointed face he used whenever I failed to hand over something he had already promised my brother. "You are making things harder than they need to be." Grandma Ruth heard about that conversation 2 days later because Lily told her that Uncle Caleb wanted her bedroom. Grandma did not say anything at first. She just poured tea, opened a tin of butter cookies, and asked Lily to go pick 3 daffodils from the front yard. The second the back door closed, she looked at me and said, "Bring me every paper connected to your house." "Why?" I asked. She held my eyes for a long moment. "Because people who call greed concern usually already have a plan." We spent the next 6 weeks in quiet paperwork. Grandma Ruth paid off the small remaining mortgage balance from an account no one in the family knew existed, but she refused to call it a gift. "Gifts can be argued about," she told me. "Paper cannot." Her attorney created a private arrangement that transferred full ownership into my name while preserving a recorded note that made it clear the house had been secured for me and Lily alone. I did not understand every legal word, but I understood the intent. My grandmother was building a locked door before anyone else knew there was a hallway. She made me promise not to tell my parents. "Not yet." She said, "They do not need information. They need boundaries." 2 months later, she died in her sleep with a book open on her chest and her reading glasses still in one hand. My father cried at the funeral, but his grief had a strange, polished quality, like he was aware of who might be watching. My mother spoke about family unity. Caleb complained that Grandma had left him nothing but an old watch and a box of tools. I stood beside the casket with Lily's hand in mine and felt like the last honest person in the room had taken the air with her. After the funeral, the pressure started again. At first, it came wrapped in softness. My mother said Caleb's rent had gone up, and it was terrible how landlords took advantage of young families. My father said my house had too much space for just me and Lily. Caleb said his kids deserved a yard. Every comment was small enough to deny, but heavy enough to bruise. "Nobody is forcing you," my mother would say. "We are just asking you to think about what is fair." Fair. In my family, fair always meant Caleb getting something he had not earned while I was expected to smile like generosity was my natural state. I did not tell them about the deed. I did not tell them Grandma had made sure the house could not be touched. I did not tell them that every time they talked about my home like a spare resource, they were speaking about something already protected by the woman they had underestimated most. I simply said, This house is not available. For almost a year, they circled without landing. Then Lily got sick. It started with headaches, then dizziness, then a fainting spell at school that made my knees turn weak when the nurse called. The doctors told me not to panic, which is what doctors say when they know panic has already arrived. There were tests, referrals, blood work, scans, and nights where I slept in a chair with my jacket over my shoulders and one hand resting on Lily's blanket. It turned out to be serious but treatable, the kind of diagnosis that steals your breath and then hands it back slowly, one appointment at a time. For 2 weeks, my world became hospital hallways, insurance forms, and the tiny brave smile my daughter gave every nurse who touched her arm. My parents knew enough to understand I was overwhelmed. They called often, but not to ask how Lily was really doing. My mother asked whether the house was being watched while I was away. My father asked where I kept the spare key in case there was an emergency. I was tired enough to answer. Under the ceramic frog by the back steps, I said, because I still believed there were lines even my family would not cross while a child was in the hospital. That was my mistake. On the morning Lily was discharged, she was pale but smiling, clutching a balloon one of the nurses had tied to her wrist. I packed her medications, signed the paperwork, thanked everyone twice, and drove home slowly, grateful for every ordinary thing I was about to see again. Our mailbox, our porch. The scratch on the hallway wall where Aaron had once carried in a bookshelf and apologized like the house could forgive him. I wanted to put Lily in her own bed, make soup, and sit beside her until she slept. Instead, I found my brother's truck in my driveway and my sister-in-law wearing my cardigan on my porch. She looked startled for half a second, then lifted her chin like she had been practicing. "Oh," she said, "you're back earlier than we thought." I stepped out of the car and closed the door softly so Lily would not wake. "Why are you in my house?" My sister-in-law glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "Your parents said this was settled." Settled. That word moved through me like cold water. The front door opened wider and Caleb came out carrying a box labeled bathroom. Behind him, I could see my entry table pushed against the wall, my framed photo of Aaron missing from its place, and a pair of children's sneakers on the rug Lily used to line up her dolls. Caleb did not look guilty. He looked irritated that I had arrived before the performance was ready. "Nora," he said, using the calm voice people use when they have already decided you are unreasonable. "Don't make this ugly." I laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because my body did not know what else to do with that much disbelief. "You moved into my house while my daughter was in the hospital." He shifted the box against his hip. "Mom and Dad said you were finally being practical. You can stay with them for a while. We need stability, Nora. The kids need space." "My daughter needs her bed," I said. That was when my mother's car pulled up behind me. She stepped out wearing sunglasses and carrying a grocery bag like she was arriving to help decorate. My father followed slower, hands in his pockets, already wearing his disappointed face. My mother looked at Lily asleep in the backseat, then at me, and sighed as if I had caused an inconvenience by coming home to my own home. "Nora, please don't start in the driveway." I stared at her. "You gave my house to Caleb." She removed her sunglasses. "We made a family decision. Without me." My father's mouth tightened. "You have been emotional lately, understandably, but someone had to think clearly." I looked from my father to my mother to my brother standing on my porch with my life in boxes behind him, and for one terrifying second, I understood exactly what they had counted on. They had counted on the hospital making me too tired to fight. They had counted on Lily's illness making me grateful for any roof, even one offered from my parents' basement like a punishment disguised as help. They had counted on the old version of me, the woman who swallowed insults fast because she had been trained to believe conflict was more dangerous than humiliation. My mother stepped closer and lowered her voice, not out of kindness, but because neighbors were beginning to look through curtains. "Your brother has 3 children. You have 1. This house makes more sense for him." "This is my home," I said. "It was Aaron's home. It is Lily's home." Caleb rolled his eyes. "Here we go." My mother's face hardened. "Aaron is gone, Nora. You cannot keep using grief as a reason to be selfish." That sentence landed so hard the world seemed to narrow around it. Even my father looked at her for half a second, not in shock, but in calculation, as if deciding whether she had said the quiet part too loudly. I could have screamed then. I could have thrown the grocery bag across the lawn. I could have told every neighbor that my family had waited until my daughter was discharged from the hospital to steal her bedroom. Instead, I looked through the car window at Lily's sleeping face and heard Grandma Ruth's voice in my memory. They are prepared for your tears. They are not prepared for your silence. I took one slow breath. Where are my things? My sister-in-law crossed her arms. We put most of it in the garage. Some of the furniture was too old to keep. Too old to keep, I repeated. Caleb shrugged. We didn't throw away anything important. The front door opened behind him, and one of his sons ran out holding Lily's stuffed rabbit, the one Aaron had bought her the day she was born. The boy was innocent. He did not know what he was carrying. But when I saw his hands wrapped around that rabbit, something clean and final snapped into place inside me. I walked to the back door of my car, opened it quietly, and lifted Lily into my arms. She stirred against my shoulder. Are we home? She whispered. I looked at the house, at the blue wreath, at my mother's grocery bag, at my brother in my doorway. Not yet, baby, I said. We are going to a hotel tonight. My mother looked relieved, which told me everything. She thought I was leaving because I had accepted it. That is best, she said softly. You need rest. We can talk when you are calmer. I turned toward her. No, we will talk when my lawyer is present. My father gave a short laugh. Your lawyer, Nora, don't embarrass yourself. Your grandmother's estate was handled. This house was always family property in spirit. In spirit. I almost smiled. People only talk about spirit when paper does not agree with them. I did not answer. I buckled Lily back into the car, walked around to the driver's side, and looked once more at my family standing in front of the house they had convinced themselves they could take. Caleb shook his head like I was being dramatic. My sister-in-law rubbed the sleeve of my cardigan like it had already become hers. My mother whispered something to my father, and he nodded. I drove away without giving them the argument they had rehearsed for. At the hotel, Lily slept for 14 hours. I sat in the chair beside the bed with every lamp off except the one near the desk, and opened the folder Grandma Ruth had made me keep in a fireproof lockbox. I had not looked at it in months because grief has strange rules. Some papers feel too heavy even when they are saving you. Inside were the recorded deed, the payoff statement, the attorney's letter, Grandma's handwritten note, and 3 copies of a document she had insisted I understand. The house belonged to me, not emotionally, not symbolically, legally, completely. My parents had no claim, no authority, no right to enter, and no right to transfer possession. I took photos of everything and sent them to the attorney whose number Grandma had written on the inside flap. His name was Victor Hale. He replied at 11:47 p.m., which is how I knew Grandma had chosen well. His message was short. Do not engage with them directly. Do not return alone. I will call you at 8:00 a.m. I slept maybe 20 minutes that night. At 8:00 exactly, my phone rang. Victor's voice was calm, dry, and sharper than any shouting could have been. He asked questions in order. Who had entered the property? Who had given them the key? Had locks been changed? Were my belongings damaged? Was my daughter's medical condition ongoing? Did I have photos? Had anyone threatened me? With each answer, his silence became heavier. Finally, he said, Your grandmother anticipated something like this. I closed my eyes. She did. She did not know the form it would take, he said. But she was very clear about intent. She left a supplemental letter in my office to be used if your parents attempted to interfere with your ownership or residence. My throat tightened. What does it say? Enough, he said. Meet me at your property at 10:30. Bring identification. Bring your daughter's discharge papers. Do not warn your family. I did exactly what he said. Before leaving, I dressed Lily in soft leggings and her yellow sweater. She was still weak, but stubborn in the way children can be when they know adults are trying to protect them from the full shape of something. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? She asked while I brushed her hair. I crouched in front of her and held both her hands. No, sweetheart, they made a bad choice and now grown-ups are going to fix it. Can I have my rabbit? She whispered. I swallowed. Yes, today. We arrived at the house at 10:26. Victor Hale was already there, standing beside a black sedan with a leather folder under one arm. He was in his 60s, tall, narrow, and dressed like a man who believed wrinkles were a moral failure. A locksmith's van was parked behind him. So was a police cruiser. I had not expected that. My stomach tightened. Victor noticed. Civil standby, he said. No drama, just witnesses. The front door opened before we reached the porch. My mother stepped out first, smiling nervously when she saw the police officer. Caleb came behind her barefoot, holding a mug from my kitchen. My mug, the white one with a tiny blue chip on the handle. My father appeared last, and for the first time in my life I saw him unsure of which expression to wear. What is this? He demanded. Victor did not look impressed. This is a formal notice to vacate and a demand for immediate restoration of access to the lawful owner. Caleb laughed. Lawful owner, this is a family matter. Victor opened his folder. No, Mr. Ellison, this is a property matter and you are trespassing. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Trespassing in our daughter's house? In your daughter's house, Victor said. Yes, my father stepped forward. Now hold on, Ruth always intended this home to stay in the family. Victor looked at him over the top of his glasses. It did. Then he turned the first document outward. Recorded warranty deed. Full ownership transferred to Nora Ellison. Mortgage satisfied. No liens. No co-owners. No family trust granting use rights to Caleb Ellison or his household. No power of attorney granted to either parent. No legal basis for entry, occupancy, lock changes, disposal of property, or attempted possession. The porch went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that makes every small sound embarrassing. A bird moved in the hedge. The officer shifted his weight. Somewhere inside the house, one of Caleb's children dropped something plastic on the floor. My mother stared at the paper like it had insulted her personally. Caleb's face changed slowly, confusion becoming anger as he realized the room was not bending toward him. My father reached for the document, but Victor pulled it back before his fingers touched the page. Copies will be provided, he said. You do not get the original. My mother looked at me then. You knew. I held Lily's hand. Grandma knew. That hurt her more. I could see it. Not because she missed Grandma, but because Grandma had outplayed her from beyond the grave. Nora, my father said, changing tactics with the smoothness of a man who had spent his life stepping from authority into pity whenever authority failed. We were only trying to help everyone. Victor turned another page. By changing the locks while the owner's child was hospitalized. My father's mouth closed. Caleb set the mug down too hard on the porch rail. Where are we supposed to go? He snapped. You have an apartment, I said. His eyes flashed. The lease ended yesterday. There it was, the missing piece. Not a temporary need, not a misunderstanding. A plan. They had let his lease end because my house had already been chosen as the solution. My mother took a step toward me. We thought once you saw them settled, you would not have the heart to remove children. I looked down at Lily, pale in her yellow sweater, watching adults discuss homes like children were props that could be arranged for sympathy. You counted on my heart, I said. That was your mistake. Victor handed Caleb a notice. You will remove your family and possessions today. The owner is willing to avoid filing a police report if the property is vacated peacefully. All keys are surrendered. All damaged property is documented, and no further contact occurs except through counsel. If you refuse, we proceed differently. My sister-in-law appeared behind Caleb wearing my cardigan again, but this time she was not standing tall. She looked from Victor to the officer to me. We changed the locks, she said, as if confession might soften the room. The locksmith cleared his throat. I'll change them back. My mother started crying then, small, controlled tears, the kind she used when there was an audience and she needed to return herself to the center of the story. Nora, please, we are family. Your brother has nowhere to go. I thought of Lily asking if she had done something wrong. I thought of Aaron's picture missing from the hallway. I thought of Grandma Ruth saying gifts can be argued about, paper cannot. I have been family every time you needed money, I said. Every time you needed babysitting. Every time Caleb needed someone to clean up the consequences of his choices. But the moment my daughter needed her own bed after leaving the hospital, you put another child in her room. My mother cried harder. My father stared at the porch boards. Caleb muttered that I was enjoying this. I was not. That is what people like Caleb never understand. Relief is not cruelty. Boundaries are not revenge just because the people who benefited from your silence experience them as punishment. The next 3 hours were humiliating for them in the exact way they had hoped my return would be humiliating for me. Caleb carried boxes back out through the same door he had entered like a conqueror. His wife returned my cardigan without meeting my eyes. The locksmith removed the new hardware and installed fresh locks while Victor photographed every damaged item. My entry table had a deep scratch across the top. 2 of Lily's dolls had been shoved into a trash bag with bathroom towels. Aaron's framed photo was in the garage behind a stack of Caleb's camping gear. When Lily saw it, she picked it up and held it against her chest. That was the only moment I almost broke. My father watched from the driveway, arms crossed, anger returning now that shame had nowhere else to go. You are tearing this family apart, he said. I looked at him. No, I am taking my house back. At 2, 8:15 p.m., the last box was loaded into Caleb's truck. Victor had everyone surrender the keys. My mother handed hers over slowly, like she was giving up something sacred. Caleb tossed his into Victor's palm. My father said he never had one. Then the officer asked him to empty his pockets, and a spare key with my old sunflower keychain appeared beside his wallet. I did not say anything. I did not need to. The key said it for me. Before they left, Victor opened one final envelope. "There is one more item," he said. My mother went pale before he even unfolded it. Ruth Ellison left this letter to be read in the event that Nora's home was ever treated as family property against her wishes. His voice carried across the driveway, steady and merciless. "To my son, his wife, and Caleb. If you are hearing this, then you did what I feared you would do. You confused Nora's kindness for emptiness and her silence for consent. This house was secured for Nora and Lily because they needed safety, not because any of you needed another thing to take. You have spent years calling your wants emergencies and her boundaries selfishness. That ends here. The house is hers. The decision is hers. If you love her, leave her in peace. If you only love what she can provide, then at least have the decency to stop calling it family." My mother covered her mouth. Caleb looked away. My father's face hardened into something almost unrecognizable, but beneath it I saw the truth. He was not grieving the relationship. He was grieving the loss of access. They drove away without apologies. The house felt strange after they left, violated but still standing. Victor stayed while I walked through each room. Lily's bed had been moved to the wall. Her bookshelf was half empty. The blue wreath was still on the front door. I took it down and dropped it into the trash. Then I carried Aaron's photo back to the hallway and hung it where it belonged. Lily stood beside me holding her rabbit. "Are we home now?" she asked. I looked at the new lock, the returned photo, the sunlight crossing the scratched entry table, and the folder of papers resting under Victor's hand. "Yes," I said. "We are home." The calls started that evening. First my mother. Then my father. Then Caleb. Then relatives I had not heard from since Grandma's funeral. I let every call ring. Messages piled up like storm debris. My mother said I had embarrassed them in front of police. My father said legal ownership was not the same as moral obligation. Caleb said his children were crying and he hoped I could live with myself. An aunt wrote that Grandma would have wanted peace. I almost replied to that one. Almost. Instead, I opened Grandma's letter again and read the line about people calling their wants emergencies. Then I blocked every number that treated my daughter's home like a shared resource. 2 weeks later, Caleb found another rental. Smaller than he wanted. Farther from the school his wife preferred. My parents paid the deposit, which proved they had always been capable of helping him without taking from me. They simply preferred the version where I lost something. The damaged furniture was repaired. The entry table kept its scratch because Lily said it looked like a lightning bolt, and maybe houses, like people, get to keep proof of what they survived. I changed the spare key location. I installed cameras. I updated every emergency contact and removed my parents from every medical form connected to Lily. That last part hurt more than I expected, not because I doubted the decision, but because there is grief in admitting someone cannot be trusted with access to your life. A month later, a letter arrived from my mother. No return address, but I knew her handwriting. Inside was one page. She said she was sorry things had gone too far. She said she never meant to hurt Lily. She said families make mistakes. She said Caleb was under pressure. She said my father was embarrassed. She said she hoped one day I would remember how much they loved me. I read it once, then turned the page over. There was no apology for changing the locks. No apology for taking Aaron's photo down. No apology for putting my recovering child in a hotel because they had decided her room belonged to someone else. It was not an apology. It was a request to return to the old arrangement, where they hurt me and I helped them feel better about it. I put the letter in the same folder as the deed, not because it mattered legally, but because I wanted a record for myself. Proof that even when confronted with paper, some people still try to rewrite the story. That night, Lily and I made soup in the kitchen. She sat on the counter stirring a bowl of dumpling dough with serious concentration while I chopped carrots. The house smelled like thyme and garlic. Rain tapped softly against the windows. For the first time in weeks, the sound did not make me anxious. Lily asked if Uncle Caleb was mad forever. I told her I did not know. She asked if Grandma and Grandpa could come back if they said sorry. I set the knife down and chose my words carefully. "Sorry is only the beginning," I said. "People also have to become safe." She nodded like that made more sense than most adult explanations. Then she asked if we could paint her room yellow in the spring. I said yes. We did paint it yellow, not pale yellow, bright, ridiculous, sunflower yellow. The kind of color my mother would call too much. The kind of color Aaron would have pretended to hate while secretly loving how happy it made Lily. On the first warm Saturday, we opened all the windows, pushed her bed to the center of the room, and covered the floor with old sheets. Halfway through the second wall, Lily got a streak of paint on her nose and laughed so hard I had to sit down. That laugh filled the room in a way no stolen furniture, no changed lock, no family decision could ever touch. People think revenge is the moment someone else suffers. It is not. At least not for me. Revenge was watching the locksmith hand me the only new keys. Revenge was hanging Aaron's picture back in the hall. Revenge was my daughter sleeping in her own bed with her rabbit tucked under her chin. Revenge was learning that I did not have to become louder to become stronger. I only had to stop handing my life to people who called theft love. My parents still tell relatives I overreacted. Caleb still says I cared more about a house than family. Maybe that is easier than saying the truth out loud. The house was never just a house. It was the line they crossed because they thought I would never draw one. But Grandma Ruth had drawn it years before, in ink, with witnesses, signatures, and a locked folder. They thought they were moving into my silence. They did not know my silence had a deed.